So police was on the radar.
Yep.
She got clocked going over the speed limit.
Yep.
What did the police do?
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the eSkate Chat podcast. This is the first time we're back in the showroom of 2022. How's it been so far?
Oh, it's good. It's good to be back.
Definitely.
Yep.
It's good.
On this one, we're going to get stuck into some of the, law changes and legislation. There's been a few things happening in Australia already this year, specifically with some of the changes made to the Australian road rules last year, and then some of the states have implemented a few new rules. So,
yeah. Well, at least the good news is most of Australia is heading into the direction of legalisation and accepting that PMDs are here. It's they're not going anywhere, and they're accepting that there's new ways to get around, avoiding all that congestion. So what have we got? We got Queensland, who've been on board for a while. We got Tassie, we got ACT, and now WA.
Yeah, Western Australia.
Yep.
So that's about
Just
half.
come on board.
So that's about half of the states and territories are now
Good news.
legal. So what happened last year, if you're not familiar with this in Australia or anyone overseas, is that we have like Australian federal road rules, and that's a set of rules made by the federal government. Essentially, that outlines everything from how a car drives on the left-hand side of the road, how traffic lights work, even how pedestrians go across like crosswalks and things like that.
Yep.
They implemented in July last year rules for personal mobility devices, which encompasses us, scooters, pretty much
any electric powered device, basically.
Yep.
And so that got passed, and it's a proper framework.
Yeah, it's in the Australian road rules, which is the Bible for road rules in Australia.
Yep.
But because how it works, the federal government sort of implements it, and it's up to the states to adopt it.
Yep.
So it's almost like a recommendation, and as you said, we've had half of the states adopt it. But
sounds like COVID all over.
Politics, right?
It's always fun.
Yeah, but so what we've seen recently this year is Melbourne, specifically in Victoria, have decided to jump into another e-scooter trial. Have you seen much of that stuff online?
Haven't been following the Melbourne side of it lately. I've been seeing a lot of stuff around New South Wales, but not so much in the Melbourne scene. So I'm not too familiar with their trial at the moment. I did hear something about it coming back on, but I wasn't sure around their stipulations around what they were allowing or not.
Again, it's positive, right?
Yeah.
They're trialing means that they're taking the first step forward to going, all right, this is a thing, let's go.
Yeah, it's forward momentum,
Yeah.
which is always a good thing.
So what do you know? Tell us, update us.
So pretty much they're coming out with another trial series. They're doing a 12-month trial of rental scooters. So they got Lime and Neuron in.
Yep.
They did this a couple years ago, and then they canned it. They had a break over COVID, and they've brought it back for another 12-month trial.
Okay. When did that start?
It started last week.
Great.
Cool.
So, it hasn't been going very long at all.
Yep.
But they've, at least they are making positive movements. But they've come out and said specifically the use of private vehicles is completely not legal.
Yep.
So private scooters or skateboards or anything like that?
Anything privately is not permitted off private land.
So there's a lot of debate around that. Private versus these rentals.
Yeah, and I guess there's a lot of that debate around like what's the difference between them, I guess. Like when you can have the same rules applying to both of them, why exclude one and not the other? And I know a lot of people turn around and say because it's a money-making scheme and, those rental ones, the governments always make money off.
Yep.
And I guess, it is a difficult argument. And I know when they started in Brisbane, it was a similar situation. Before they introduced the legalisation of the devices, they were doing Lime scooters in Brisbane. And they were all okay, no issues, but anything private technically was illegal. And then, it all swung around in the end. So hopefully Melbourne comes the same way. But right now it's definitely one of those grey area things.
You've got your legalisation, being able to use it like freely, but in a trial capacity. But then it's the other debate is about safety, and then I guess a good question here is which is more safe, someone from a private user or someone who just randomly rocks up and goes, hey, I want to hire this scooter, I want to get from A to B, or with your group of mates, you just want to have fun, which is at risk more so in terms of safety. I reckon it's the other way around. People who own them are trained up.
They're typically more experienced
to
get around on the product.
They know how to think ahead, and they respect what they ride, because they've invested money in this product. But anyone who's just hiring, you can just find one on the side of the road who you don't know the history of. It's probably been used and abused. And then it's just Saturday afternoon, just want to have a bit of fun. And then generally this is when you start doing monos off gutters and
riding down sets of stairs. That's a problem because often you see these e-scooter accidents.
Yeah.
And it's at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning.
In the middle of the city.
Yeah.
Like someone stumbled out of a nightclub. And so it's definitely pros and cons. I've brought along a little cheat sheet of actual data and research so we can not just be spitballing.
Yeah.
That was one of the main concerns that the Victorian Police Commissioner raised, and he said private vehicles are more unsafe because their e-scooters can be regulated. They know what the wattage is. They have speed limits in place on them, and they have geo restrictions. So if they go into a pedestrian zone, the speed limit drops down. But where is it? According to the Accident and Analysis Prevention Academic Journal of Australia, they actually studied the scooter e-trial in Brisbane back in 2019, and they found that privately owned vehicles were more responsible. They had a higher level of safety compliance.
Yep.
So as you say, they know the rules. If you're going to spend a couple grand on a vehicle, you're probably going to find out what those rules are.
Yep. Yeah. And, if you're going to use it as a commuting device, it's not really, yes, it's going to be fun as you commute somewhere, but the primary use of a hire one, it's for joyriding. It's for fun. It's for recreation. And that's when shit can go wrong.
It's interesting you say about that because I know, and it might have been the same group that did the study, but in the Australian road rules, they actually released a document outlining the analysis and the research they did leading up to the implication of those rules. And they released all their statistics of what they assessed for, the safety measures and the risk analysis of the different situations of a board being limited to different speeds or different power and different environments. And so they went through all of that and, they actually found that, some of these ones, like, I think Melbourne originally was looking at 6 km/h speed limit or something like that. And in those Australian road rules findings, they found, at lower speeds, it was more of a hindrance and more of a danger. And so they actually outline a variety of different situations as to why and finding that middle ground of safety. So it's interesting that, they've released that and then Melbourne still has their own consideration of what is or isn't safe.
There's two sides to that. So I know you have thoughts on like why the speed limit should be in place and how that should sort of be adopted by governments. Do you want to sort of tell us about that?
Yeah. My view on that is there has to be a speed limit. Like I'm all for that. That totally makes sense. And I'm just more from the motor vehicle side of things. You've got a car, you ride on the road and you can only ride certain speeds in certain areas. That's a fantastic way for then police to be able to police that and monitor that. They can get out and do their work. If they're then trying to create a limit around speed based on what the device is capable of doing, then that's where the police are going to have so much of a harder work as technology is changing so quickly. You can hide motors, you can change the device's power so easily. And how's the police going to be down the street and go, oh, hey, no, you can't ride that. Oh, wait up, I haven't seen that board before. Or what's the specs on that? And they don't need to be engineers. They don't need to understand all the inner workings of that. So I think if you had a framework based around that, it's going to make their job really hard. And there's just so many greys. Whereas you got a dead set speed limit, that's it. You get over it, you get fined. And to me, it's the most practical way.
Yeah. Like we've said before on other episodes, there needs to be a framework. There has to be rules. And, okay, if you break them, you're breaking the rules. You get your fine, you get whatever the penalty is. In Brisbane now, or Queensland in general, and most of the other states have adopted the same rules because it's been passed down from the federal road rules. It's a 25 km/h speed limit.
And it's working because those police, they are, hanging in certain areas like Coronation Drive they've got the radar guns out, and that's the easiest way for them to do their job.
Yep. And there's other rules associated with it: helmets, lights, and areas you're allowed to ride, pedestrian zones.
Size of the device as well. Like you can't just have this giant electric device kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it gives them the framework to at least work around.
Yep.
Nick, you've had experiences in Brisbane with the radar guns on the cycleways.
Yeah, definitely. So that's since I moved to Brisbane, I've been commuting a lot more on like the board and train, like a combination. And a common way that we commute is the bikeway on the Centenary Motorway, and then we come into the Bicentennial on the river. That's a really common commuting spot for.
Great spot to ride, by the way.
Awesome spot to ride. It's a smooth path. It's like one of the busiest and most popular commuting thoroughfares for cyclists, scooter riders, skateboards. That's a really popular spot where the police have been setting up with their radars, and they pull over people every day. And my partner, she got picked up exceeding the 25 kilometers an hour, and she got fined.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What about a bike? If they're going over 25k an hour, which they're quite large, those bikes,
Correct.
and they're quite heavy, and they can. Are they up to the same?
No,
rules?
so this is where the whole incident sort of came into place. And so, in this specific time, she was not much over the 25, but she was over it. And she was instructed to stop. And because obviously cyclists are traveling at much faster rates, that actually caused an incident on the bikeway, which caused cyclists to come off and come down. And there was about like 2 cyclists crashed.
So, okay, let's go back. So police was on the radar.
Yep.
She got clocked going over the speed limit.
Yep.
What did the police do from there? How did they stop her?
So they've stepped out with a hand up to instruct her to stop. And because they were set up on one side of the bikeway, there was another officer booking a scooter rider who was already pulled over. So there was like not much space there. And then because it's a 2-way bike lane, she didn't want to cross onto the wrong side.
Yeah.
So she stopped kind of where she could. But it was peak hour commute, so there were bikes everywhere. And the bikes behind her had nowhere to go. And again, so you've got to remember, the cyclist ended up running into her board and came off, which then brought down another cyclist and caused an injury. And, this went on for a little while, and then she had to go in and give a statement and all this because there was a complaint. And since then,
Who made the complaint?
The cyclist made the first complaint, and then, went on, the police contacted her as a witness and then a couple other people. So that was that situation. That kind of outlined, I guess, a couple of things. Firstly is the way they're policing it and the discrepancy between policing the speed with a device like that against bikes, which are going much faster, and the variations in that. And in that situation, it would have been safer for a product and device to continue at the same speed and not be pulled up. And B, like if everybody's going to be, or one person's going to be capped to a certain speed in that place, then everybody should be.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Bikes going at different speeds,
100%.
going quicker than the electric devices.
The speed of a cyclist, like someone that's commuting every day on a road bike,
Yeah.
35, 40.
So when I do alternate with my bike along the same route, and when I cycle through there, anywhere from 35 to 40, and there'll be people passing me. So like you do get cyclists ranging from that 25, and you get cyclists all up to that 45 km an hour. It's a long flat section of bikeway. It's
and there's
super
some
smooth.
serious cyclists there too. Like they are like professionals wanting to go fast.
And it's not just commuters on there. It is like cyclists actually on training rides, just riding. And so people do ride at some decent speed. So you think about it, if a cyclist is doing 40 and you're capped at 25, there's a 15k an hour difference. So it's the same as you running into a wall at 15k an hour. If they run into the back of you, they got to pass you.
Well, it's not like the largest cycleway ever. So if there's constant overtaking taking place, that's a potential.
So I think we measured it, and the whole bikeway is only about 2 meters wide or something like that, and then it's split 2 ways. So there's a dotted line down the center for 2 directions.
You're right, man. That is dangerous.
It can be at times, and like since I've been doing more radars, I've been really conscious about keeping the speed down. And you are, and like scooters and skateboards, and you start seeing them stuck at 25, and it's just cyclist after cyclist flies past you.
Yeah,
and it can be dangerous, especially like if they come up quickly, you don't hear them, or like if you've got a merge and then they're coming up, like it can be a little bit sketchy if you can't keep up with some of the traffic.
Do you know what would be interesting though, to get another podcast like this, but then we get some like professional cyclists who use that route all the time and get their take on how does this affect your run getting from A to B or whatever it is, with training, if you've got these scooters can only do 25.
Yeah.
Like if I was going that fast, you'd be like, all right, when can I pass? When can I pass? And you're looking, coming the other way. Yeah, that would be frustrating.
It would be, and it would be constant. I think like you can correlate it directly to the road.
Yeah.
Like how insane would it be if motorbikes went 140 and cars went 110 and trucks went 80?
Yeah.
It would be absolute chaos, and you're forcing overtaking is one of the most dangerous things.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't line up that even in Queensland where the rules are the best they are, there's still things like that.
Some
There's always room
improvements
for
to be made.
Yeah, and after commuting a lot more in those areas, like I am finding like I am all for having those variable speed limits in different areas. I know in some ways it makes it a little bit harder to police because it's not just one speed limit. They go, you went over this, we're going to book you. But, you know, I generally start through South Bank. And for example, there, I definitely believe that it should be lower than 25. Like, people should not be riding through South Bank at 25k an hour. Like, and with this current rule, there's essentially nothing stopping them from riding through there at 25k an hour. Because there's a sign on the Goodwill Bridge that says, I think it's 10 or 15k an hour. And the police sometimes do radar there and they do pick up cyclists who exceed that there. But once you're on the bikeway or on the riverfront, there's no speed limits. So realistically, if you're on a board doing 25k an hour, you're not technically breaking any rules, but it's super unsafe. So, you know, somewhere like that should be brought down to 10 or 15, like in a busy populated area.
I think they've done that, like, say, Queen Street Mall, like, they're classed as a pedestrian area.
Well, you're not allowed to ride a bike through there either.
Not anymore.
No, not anymore.
I'm all for varying speed limits depending on where they are.
Yeah.
But the speed limit should be set to the path or the road, and then everyone abides by that, sort of no matter what you're on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely think that's right. And, you know, and then having like in Queensland, we have that rule of, you know, it's, 50 kilometres an hour in urban areas unless signed otherwise. So if you had a similar kind of ruling with devices and bikes, so it's, you know, bike paths are 25 max unless signed otherwise. So I'm talking, footpaths. And then bikeways are, like we have in our highways, they go up to 60k an hour for rural roads. Our bikeways could be 40k an hour unless signed otherwise. And then like heavily congested. So I think that would be, you know, something that if the governments could kind of work towards something like that, that would probably actually make things a lot safer on those bikeways and probably alleviate a few kind of congestion issues that you definitely see every afternoon. It doesn't take much you sit there for 20 minutes and watch the scooters coming along stuck at 25k an hour and how many cyclists are trying to get around them both ways. Yeah. And the congestions that it causes. And
the frustrations as well.
It's definitely some like near misses you see like every time.
Something to think about with infrastructure too. So they are building more and more of these cycleways. You know, if we were to raise that limit to 40 or whatever it is on a designated cycleway, take that into account, make it a little bit wider, make sure that, I don't know, it slows down for corners or whatever you need to do. But yeah, I think that should be kept in mind when they're actually like making these.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people need to remember when we're talking about these cycleways, we're actually talking about, a dedicated cycleway. These are pathways and cycleways where there's actually not supposed to be any foot pedestrians on them.
Oh, and don't get me wrong, there is
sometimes, but
joggers, walkers.
And so another bikeway in Brisbane is really popular is the Southeast Freeway Bikeway. Now that's one that runs from, they've just extended it to like 8 Mile Plains all the way into South Bank.
Cool.
It's a dedicated bikeway. It actually has signs that says no pedestrians.
Is it smooth surface?
It's super smooth. It's awesome.
Have we ridden it yet?
Not yet.
Is that the one in from like Mount Gravatt?
Yeah, so it started in Mount Gravatt and they've done a lot of upgrades to it to remove having to ride on any kind of roads or footpaths. And you can basically stay on a dedicated cycleway now all the way into South Bank.
Okay, so we need to get
because it's not super scenic. It just follows the highway.
But it'd be good range test though.
Oh yeah, it's cool.
Like if that links all the way up.
Yeah, and so something like that, for example, and there's plenty of people who use that with PMDs for commuting again from the southern suburbs in. It's a great way to do it, but again, it's a dedicated cycleway that a lot of fast cyclists use. And if you're stuck doing 25k an hour on a barriered pathway where there's nobody else except cyclists, you're a hindrance, and you're basically just a resistance in their flow.
Yeah,
it's true.
I think they will need to police this, actually enforce it, because now I did some research on scooters the other day, and you can buy a Dualtron top of the line. It does 130 kilometers an hour, and I know it's a lot for a scooter, and we know there's individuals out there that are going to push that. So I get from a police perspective that it's going to take up resources,
Yep.
but also the inevitability of the rise of PMDs.
Yeah.
It's just going to have to be something that needs to be done.
Well, I definitely think so, because the more they're also promoted for reducing vehicle traffic on the road. So I don't know if you know, Queensland Rail did a trial between July 1st last year and December 31st to allow e-scooters and bikes on the trains at any time. So previously they weren't allowed to go into the city during peak hours or out from the city during peak hours, and they did a trial to allow them. And they've now passed that trial and it's now implemented permanently. So what this means is that they're essentially allowing more PMDs and bikes to ride on the train to try and promote people to reduce cars. And it's going to be difficult to do that if we don't adopt our legislation to help promote this and get people off the roads. And like, I ride the train 2 or 3 times a week coming down, and thankfully I'm against peak hour, but it's still good to know that like I can just hop on with a skateboard and chuck it under, and every day I'll see multiple people with scooters, electric bikes, skateboards. So we really like that legislation to help support that as well is going to be good.
I guess it's, again, sensibility. You got a device that can go 130k an hour. Doesn't mean you should be using it.
Yeah, as
Like
we always say, you can buy a car that does 350 kilometers an hour riding on the road. I mean, driving on the road, you can do that.
You get in trouble.
I think a lot of the research also points to the inevitable growth of electric vehicles. And that's something that Lime actually mentioned. Their government relations officer said when they did get the trial approved in Melbourne, they did the research on how many scooters they would need, and it was comparable to Berlin or Paris in Melbourne. That's how many people wanted them, and they didn't have enough scooters to put out there. The amount of people trying to get on these things is going to grow greatly over the next couple of years. There's some facts here. The global micro-mobility market has been valued at $40 billion in 2020. And predictions to go to 300 to 500 billion by 2030. So it's a pretty substantial growth.
And again, like, I know we're focusing on Australia and our rules here, but it's definitely happening around the world as well. And as things are developing further, people are looking for better, cheaper, more efficient ways to get around. And so I think, we definitely need to reconsider these things.
I've got a few global stats for you then.
Oh, yeah,
I might throw these out and you can see what you reckon about them.
Yeah.
The Mobility Ownership Consumer Survey, this was in 2021, found that almost 70% of respondents are willing to use micromobility for their commute. So this is people that aren't specifically doing it already. That's a majority.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
I wonder how many of those people purchase it for recreation first and then realise that commuting is another great option.
It did say the willingness to use small vehicles was highest in the countries with a long tradition of micromobility, bikes. So, countries like Italy and China had the highest uptake rate because they've not been using cars and stuff like that for a while. And then respondents in places that were most reluctant to use it is where the governments have done the harshest crackdowns. So the UK actually topped the list for that. What else do we have here? 2021 was the year of the e-bike. Guess in the 12 months over from July 2021, the growth in sales went up by 240% across the board.
Yeah, well, I guess COVID had a lot to do with that, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I got the stats for that, but I'm sure electric skateboards were somewhat similar. We saw definitely an increase.
Yeah, everything went up. But I think all sort of hobbies and sports went up in that time, and you couldn't travel, so you had to spend your money on other ways.
I've got some stats on how many hours people spend in traffic. That's because that's an increasing problem too. Everyone's getting back to work after the lockdowns
I
and
spend
stuff.
in traffic.
It's a lot. And you don't live in a city.
Yeah, that's right. Like it takes 40 minutes to get here, but peak hour with school drop off, I would say 1 hour 20 usually one way, and then going back. 40 minutes going back because we usually tag team. So that's 2 hours a day times by 5
in your car.
I think these are specifically for like standstill traffic. San Francisco topped the list in America with 50 hours per year lost to just sitting there.
Sitting, standstill, and try. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then Houston, Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago, they're all up there.
Yeah.
And this is probably people like, I mean, your commute, you're going a long way.
Yeah.
So that's a bit different. These are probably
standstill,
within
short
distances and just not moving.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I look at it every time I commute on the board. So when I'm on that bikeway next to Centenary Motorway, and I've done a couple of videos and tagged them on Instagram, and you'd be going along and you're at the fence there, and there's just traffic backed up, 3 lanes on a highway, standstill, trying to get across the bridge on Centenary Motorway, and they're not going anywhere. And you've just got cyclists and scooters and skateboards just hooking along the bike path next to them, and it's so funny to watch, and it's just comical sometimes. And this is exactly why I've transitioned a lot more to the board and the train, because it doesn't matter which way I go home. You typically get caught in traffic somewhere. And it's just, the train's enjoyable. I can sit there and do some work, watch a video, whatever, and then I get to skate home after. So
makes sense.
Jeff and I both, during the border restrictions, there was a lot of traffic there, and there was times where it took over 2 hours one way to get into work, where usually it would take 25 minutes. Got to the stage, I'm like, stuff it. It's 30-kilometer skate, pretty decent. And I could do it in 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's it. And it's scenic. You go along the beach,
great
air in your face, you feel good.
And same thing. Like because I used to be down at Tugan as well, and I know we skated to work a couple of times. And when they started doing those roadworks through Palm Beach and stuff, and I started skating a lot more, and even that short commute, so that's only like a 15K drive, and I started getting to the point where I could skate in the same time as I could drive because of the roadworks. And so again, it's like, when you've got things like that, having other options where people can remove the vehicles from the road just freed up all that infrastructure.
Changing gears, this weekend just passed, we went down to Sydney to electric skateboard go-kart event and such.
Oh my God, that was so fun.
The track was awesome.
The location was like 10 out of 10. What an epic place. How fun was it?
Oh, it was so much fun. The actual track, we've been to a lot of go-kart places now. The size of it was big enough that you could get up to speed, and you really had to, watch your brakes, getting into the corners.
Totally.
It was wide enough that you could pass people.
That back straight, you could go very quick.
Well, you could be full pinned all the way down it. Like you get probably at top speed about halfway down, and then just after that you'd be rolling back on the brake ready for the corner.
I thought it was really challenging. Like great for the professional rider. You had top speed. You've got those challenging corners. And what I found with myself riding there, took a little bit to get the confidence, like to understand where the board and how the board was going to handle these corners, and at what point would that traction just go from underneath my feet. But once you got used to it, man, it just stuck to the wheels and it didn't move, and you could just really push it.
How did you find the surface of that compared to other ones who have skated?
The surface was 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. It was perfect.
Even comparing it to like the outdoor tracks we skate on that are like bitumen asphalt kind of thing, like, having that surface down there, which was coated, it was consistent, it was flat, it was level, you knew how it was going to react. Whereas all the outdoor ones, they were grippy to a degree, but they just weren't the same. They didn't have the same kind of feeling, and it was just great to ride on.
Oh man, it was so good. Everyone had a really good time. There's positive vibes. So I guess, when are we going to do it again?
Yeah, I think.
And where?
There's been call-outs. I've seen, we posted the video of it last night. We'll chuck it in the description so you can watch it. There was actually quite a few people in Canberra that wanted us to go out there. So there's a rising eSkate in Canberra, plenty in Melbourne, and Brisbane. Obviously, that's in Australia. And then
if anyone has any, proper connections, friends, family who own these tracks, make the introduction. Let's go.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Like the actual venue itself allowing us to go on. These guys loved it. They thought it was cool. All the staff were out there watching, and I think they would love to have us back. So
yeah, it was really positive. The track was amazing. I was so stoked with it, and I could definitely picture a proper race event there, because it's got the facilities, and it was a professional setup. And I think out of all the other indoor go-karts I've ridden, different tracks, different places, this was probably the most professional in terms of surface setup. Ridden some other great locations, but the track was not like this. This was like a proper Formula One track that had the hard turns, and it was so challenging. technically tough, but depends on how you took it.
Yeah, great spectator area too, so that would definitely help for a race.
Yeah.
The location in Sydney, we could get a lot of people out to check it out.
Yep.
Yeah, really easy to get to, close to the airport too.
And they've got the timing set up already. Really good timing system.
Yeah, good timing system.
Yeah.
And the go-karts, how fun were they?
Yeah, we went out and did have a crack. The go-karts were electric as well.
Yeah.
So
No emissions. It was nice inside.
no emissions. And Jeff loved his boost button.
Oh, yeah, the turbo button.
Don't talk to me.
The red button. Yeah, Nick missed that. But I didn't think that red button was going to do a lot. But, yeah, it had enough of a kick. It got you going and down that back straight.
Yeah.
If you pressed it too early coming out of that corner, you could actually go straight into the barriers. It was rad.
What it did was it gave you it was essentially a NOS button. It increased the current and it gave you 5 seconds per lap and reset every single lap. So you had to see where you wanted to use your power. Nick forgot he had it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick was behind me and, I'm heavier than Nick and Nick couldn't work out why. I was just a better driver.
We'd come out of the corners and Jeff pulled away each time and I was like, I don't get it.
How could you miss that red button? It was like there staring you in the face.
Well, I always caught up to you at the next corner. I just couldn't work out how you were pulling away enough straight.
It's funny that since last weekend, do you know what I have been thinking? I was like, man, I need that red button on my electric combi.
On your combi.
Yes. How good would that be?
I'm sure you could put it in there because if it's only got a spike for a short while.
I agree.
Good.
We could.
Good.
So I've been thinking about it and
It might be fast enough already.
it'll go right.
Yeah, you haven't driven it yet.
Nah. Look, it's going to go well. But, I mean, come on. The fun factor. You're in there, you're in traffic, you press it and you go, woo.
A van doesn't need to go that fast.
Maybe we should put it on the side of the board remote. Just like a little NOS button on the board.
A little bit of a boost. Could be interesting.
Nick doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, especially if you accidentally press it when you're not ready for it.
I feel like we'd need to look into that one a bit more.
Yeah.
Hilarious. So, look, that's probably going to about do us for this one. So that's a bit of a chat on micro-mobility, where we're at. Leave a comment with your thoughts.
Yeah.
So hopefully by the end of the year, maybe we'll see Victoria coming to the party with some proper changes. New South Wales is going to be the tough one though.
Yeah, I think they're the ones that have been kind of probably dragging their feet the most out of all the states. Like they haven't initiated really any kind of trials. They haven't sort of put forward anything. So
I reckon we should get that New South Wales Transport Minister on here. Yep. Let's have a FAQ. It's just a general discussion and
I'd love to. He wouldn't come.
We can get some phone calls, dial in questions at the same
Maybe
time.
I'll fly down to him. We can have a chit chat. But this is a man that doesn't even like push bikes.
Yes.
Like he's against push bikes, let alone electrical devices. So
I'll rock up on my bike then too.
he's not going to be a fan, but hey, we'll see what the future holds. And I do know that international governments are looking to one another a lot.
Yeah.
So, you know, in places where it is dwindling behind, they're going to look at Australia and like US. Obviously, a lot of Europe's actually taking a big step forward with some countries lacking behind quite severely. So once more and more jump on board, other countries are going to start seeing it and implement it themselves.
The pressure will build.
Right on.
Cool.
See you next time, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.